I am going to introduce Surface Level.
Should I keep my jacket button?
Just take it off. Take off your shirt too. Get them views up.
No, that's you. Do a push-up on your TikTok.
You know, you love a good gimmick.
I hate gimmicks.
Oh, that's why you don't have a show.
Oh, girl.
You in the fight with a large cat?
I was in a sword fight.
My queerest fantasy would involve
6-inch.
Now, you don't have a license to review me. If I disclose my deepest, darkest secret, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I die. And I'm not going to die by living in my truth and speaking my truth. And a lot of people like to record and like to be recorded. I've done it with consent.
Let's roll the tape.
I was.
Queer liberation isn't just rainbows and confetti cannons. Coming out is just about your comfort with whom you are. And if shouting it to the rooftops makes you feel better about who you are, do it. Talking about sex is like not a one-time conversation. Like a year from now, I may feel differently. Like you can revise those feelings.
More than ever, we need to hear from one another. There was this guy, so sexy. He could have been a catfish, asking me to send all these pictures. My dumb ass is doing all of it. Like, I can look at other people's stories so much, but I have to actually live my own experience.
And remember, stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
I'm curious.
We're on.
Yes, we are. What an experience. So exciting.
How many cards you got?
Well, you know, I have to, just in case, I got to get you girls together. I got a whole set of reads. Ready.
All right, y'all ready?
I'm ready.
Y'all ready? Yes. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special live edition of Surface Level, curious conversations about the Black and queer experience. I'm one of your hosts, Damon, and today, Jordan, Tony, and I are discussing the privilege of reclaiming queer pleasure. This is the age of pleasure. All right, so we are back in Harlem.
We are.
For the girls that have been here from the beginning, we recorded the first season of this show 10 blocks away on my living room floor.
Yes.
This is not quite my living room floor.
No, it's not. This is the Renaissance. It's giving Formation World Tour. It really is.
So yeah, how y'all feeling being back? Or being a little upgraded, more lights.
I mean, this is nice. I mean, I think that this is like our 5-year anniversary of. There's some people that are in this room that was here when we did a focus group for the show. In an apartment in Harlem, my apartment, and I remember when y'all told us that the show was boring, and so we had to retool it.
Yes.
I'm bored.
Yeah.
We played an episode and everything, but now.
And then the girl said, "That was nice." Now what?
Right.
That was very nice. Good try.
I remember also being in your apartment and Tony was like, "Oh, whenever we do a live show, we gotta come out to this song, I'm Curious, by Midnight Star."
Yeah.
So it's very full circle moment for us.
Right,
today.
that song has kind of been like our anthem.
A little two-step.
Yeah, a little anthem.
Yeah, I remember that from childhood.
Cool. You wanna get the girls engaged?
Absolutely. So since this is a live episode, which is very special for us, we want to hear from you in the audience. So we'll be using Mentimeter, and it's anonymous, and it'll allow you to contribute to today's conversation. So if you take out your phone, you can go to menti.com and enter the code you see on the screen. Or you could just scan the QR code that's going to show up. And you will be prompted with the first question on the screen, so you can go ahead and submit your answer and then, be a part of this conversation.
And while that's getting set up, we're going to start with one of the foundations of our show. So we end every show by saying, stay curious. Mm-hmm. And we ask every guest that's ever been on our show what they're curious about. So we're going to start there today. Jordan, what are you curious about?
What am I curious about? Something that I've really been thinking about lately is just like the concept of letting go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a person that feels a lot of comfort and a lot of safety in being in control of things.
Yeah.
And
awesome, people know you here.
Right, I'm just like, what y'all know? And I just feel like these last, I don't know, maybe like 12 months have been really challenging, just trying to keep up with all the responsibilities, and the show is growing, and life is just lifing right now, and I'm having to just sort of like release some things. And so I've been delegating, which has been very difficult for me.
Sometimes you got to get somebody else to do it.
I know,
A lot of times.
but I feel like I always do it best. So it's really difficult. It's really difficult. Because I'm just like, ooh, why'd you do that? But we're letting go. Trying. So that's what I'm curious about. Like, I'm just trying to like, explore that more, continue to push myself and just like lean on the people around me and trust the people around me and just sort of like make room for other things in my life so I'm not constantly like overwhelmed and, all those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tony?
Well, this is something I've brought up before, but I'm really curious about who's going to be there to take care of our generation when we get old. A lot of us aren't having children, and so I'm like, I usually think that, most times children are taking care of their elders, and we don't have children to take care of us when we are elders. So is it giving Golden Girls? Are we going to be in a facility all together and doing each other's hair? I don't know. I'm curious about that. And, Damon has always tried to talk me off a ledge. We're going to be fine, girl. We're going to make money. So we're gonna be able to pay for somebody to take care of us. And I hope that's true.
Y'all can have a kid that can take care of us. I just won't be doing it. And I'm curious about where we go as a community, and a really interesting time for us. Like, a lot of us are talking about turning inward and protecting ourselves, but for me, I wonder what that does for the broader world outside of our community.
Yeah.
When it feels like so many things are against us, what does it mean to turn inward? Is that protecting our peace? Likely, mostly. But what does that do for the next generation and for people that still need to learn and grow and learn to love us? But that ain't my battle and my cross to bear right now, so I'm figuring it out.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
That child.
It's a journey, y'all.
Gilead Sciences has sponsored and developed content for this segment.
So today's event commemorates National Black HIV and AIDS Day. So we're going to have two conversations highlighting generational differences in our views towards sexuality. The first convo will be from our millennial point of view, having spent all of our adult life in a world post-AIDS crisis, and then most of it in the age of PrEP. So we're going to start the conversation here with our first question. So for the two of you, how have your attitudes towards sex changed in a pre and post-PrEP world?
Ooh,
Yeah.
pre-prep.
Pre-PrEP.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gay life is pretty interesting because, I think that growing up, knowing that I was gay, I wasn't really saying it to anybody, but you watch TV, like you watch movies, and you just hear people have conversations around you, and I feel like a lot of times people just associate HIV as just like an inevitable part of the gay experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I feel like you just kind of think like, oh, like if I'm gay, it's automatically risky
It's gonna
for
happen.
my health. You know what I mean? And I feel like that really does something to your psychology. You know what I mean? Like I remember when I actually went to a clinic here in New York in Chelsea. If anybody knows that clinic,
Everybody
it's like,
knows this
where all
clinic
the
in
gays
Chelsea.
go to. But I had a lot of anxiety going into that clinic because I had unprotected sex, and I had this mental thing where I'm just like, I think this is it for me. You know what I mean? And I remember going into the clinic that day, and the last thing I wanted to see was a familiar face.
Oh my
and
God.
like,
The horror.
I saw somebody who I knew, and I was just kind of like, I don't know if they could feel my shame, but like I just kind of like shrunk a little bit. And I feel like, that was a common thing,
Yeah.
before PrEP was introduced in 2012. And I feel like, I just had a lot of fear around it. And so I think that now that we are in a post-PrEP era, I think that now, I'm able to actually like focus on the pleasure of being sexual more and less about the paranoia of like what could come from it. So I think it's just been like a sense of relief, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in a pre-prep world, like I was still trying to figure out what gay sex. Just in general, I didn't have sex until college,
Right.
so I wasn't like you girls.
Well,
I'm not shaming you. It's all right.
I waited until I was of age.
All right,
to-
allegedly.
Yeah.
But
I did not. and my
for
mama
me,
found out.
I didn't know a lot about gay sex. I didn't have those conversations with my parents, and so I was figuring it out on the go. And it was more cautionary lifestyle because it was you learned, use condoms. You don't want to get HIV. You don't want to get a girl pregnant before it's time.
Never a concern.
So, but then, never a concern. But then when the FDA approved Truvada in 2012, like Jordan just mentioned, and I was diagnosed HIV positive in 2011, the year before. So I never really had a PrEP experience, if you will. And while I think the advancement of medicine is great, I sometimes feel like the girls use it as a get out of jail free card and like jump out the window. I think people still need to have good judgment and good sense when it comes to their sexual health and sexual activity. And so my attitude is like, I feel more liberated because there is medicine in place for me to be able to live a healthy life. And I'm fortunate enough to have access to that medicine. But at the end of the day, I feel like we deserve. So let's be liberated. Let's live.
Yeah.
In a post-PrEP era.
And I just think testing used to be terrifying. Like the paranoia you mentioned, like you go there and especially if we're younger, maybe you don't have a primary care doctor yet. Everybody's going to the clinic because some people may not have insurance and it's free. And you go in there and it's just like, okay, well, we're in this club together. I already feel this shame, and I'm afraid of like that interaction. I'm afraid of what the answer is going to be, and now I just feel like I have much more control over my life, and I'm able to engage people and experiences in a way that is not scary. And I think that's a positive thing.
It's like that episode of Sex and the City where Samantha Jones went in and got tested and she passed out on the ground.
Oh, yes.
I would have did that if I didn't get embarrassed, but I definitely wanted to pass out on the ground that day. I was just like, woo! All right.
Passed out from getting good news?
Just passed out because you're going back into the room to hear what your results are
so it's giving very much anxiety.
Right, like I can't take it anymore.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we're ready to move to the second question. So how have preventative practices created new conversations that stigmatize sex and sex health? Tony, do you want to start with this one?
So let's talk about PrEP hoes.
A
PrEP hoe.
Who are you calling a hoe?
Yeah, this was new. This was new. So I do want to. Last spring, we partnered with.
It's reading time.
No, well, it's going to be a couple of reading sessions in here, but we partnered with Mobilizing Our Brothers initiative, right?
Yes.
To lead a community conversation around a short video called A Story Within a Story. And it was based in the heat of the pandemic when we were all inside. So it was around the Black queer experience at that time. There was a character who was stigmatized for having a lot of sex with multiple partners, and they called this character a PrEP hoe. So that was shaming them. And for me, it's stigmatizing liberation and having sex. And my thought is we fight so hard for liberation to only start shaming the girls who have arrived at liberation. I don't understand it.
I mean, it's definitely, it's like, yes, it was in that short film, but it's also on social media. I saw a viral tweet that said,
she got a note too, it's a battle.
If he's on PrEP, if he's on PrEP, just focus on yourself, King.
And what did you take that to mean?
I took that as, if you are trying to get to know somebody and you're building a relationship with them and you find out that they're on PrEP, then they're probably having sex with other people and you need to focus on yourself.
So using or being on PrEP is saying you're promiscuous.
You're promiscuous, you're less pure, you're less interested in monogamy. I lump them all together.
All the trappings of things we love.
Yes. And, I think it's interesting that we have now moved into a space where taking PrEP or being on PrEP is now being stigmatized as like you're a PrEP hoe. And I actually had an experience where when I just got into a committed relationship, I was having my 3-month check-in with my doctor, and I was just like, I don't think I need to be on PrEP anymore. And she stopped me dead in my tracks. And she was just like, no. That's not how this works. She was just like, I've had a lot of patients, and monogamy does not mean immunity. And I think
they should put that on a shirt somewhere.
We actually
put it up on the screen.
She was spitting bars at 8 a.m. And I was just
like, girl, I had to go to the office after this.
Right. So I was just like, okay. And I think that, I think in an effort to show like trust, right? You're like, I'm going to be off PrEP. You're going to be off PrEP. And I think that really how we should be looking at this is like, you're taking control and you're taking responsibility for your own health.
Absolutely.
Because no one else at the end of the day will. And so I think that it's dangerous, I think, to talk about PrEP in that way because it will actually maybe be successful in discouraging somebody from protecting themselves.
It's really nasty work.
Yeah.
It's really nasty.
Yeah, and I think, talk about stigmatizing ourselves, we have to also think about the things happening outside of our community. We're now in a place where employers are suing because they don't want to provide PrEP. They're saying, oh, that's just for the gays and all these things. So when we do the work of stigmatizing within our own communities, it gives people who don't dislike us, people that do not support us, more ammunition.
Yeah.
More right to do things. They're like, hey, if they're talking shit about each other inside, then why should we care about it? Why should we want to continue to support legislation and to support initiatives like this
But
that bring
that
awareness?
works for a lot of minority
Yes.
issues
Yes.
across the board.
Like, we have to stand up for ourselves first because nobody else fucking will.
Yeah.
Next question.
Period. And on that note.
So as younger people, do you think sometimes we are too cavalier when discussing safer sex practices with generations before us, particularly those who lived through the trauma of the AIDS crisis?
So,
Safer sex.
Safer sex meaning PrEP, like safe sex people immediately associate with condom use. Safer sex being on PrEP, using Doxy, all the newer things that have come up for people to protect themselves in more recent years.
Got you. I mean, I think our younger generations being too cavalier about these conversations, I feel like we have to look at the reality. Like we, our coming of age, PrEP didn't exist, you know? So I feel like the fear was a bit more magnified. Like I remember a family member after finding out that I was gay was just like, I just want to make sure that you're safe. I'm like, wow, your mind went there first.
Yeah.
because I mean, that is, how old was this person who was concerned?
I mean, they were an adult during the height of the AIDS crisis. So I think that I'm not thinking of it like that. You know what I mean? When did I come out? 20. And so I think that I personally will cut them slack because if you're in your 20s right now, you probably never had a sexual experience without the accessibility of PrEP. So you naturally live in a world that has a little bit more options for you to be able to protect yourself. And do I think that younger people need to educate themselves on the AIDS crisis and the history of it? Absolutely. But do I think that it's natural for them to have a distance from that trauma and not carry the same exact weight as us or even generations that were, starting their sexual journey at the height of that? Like, I don't think that that's realistic. And it's almost, for me, like, I can't be like this so much. It almost feels like the student loan conversation where it's just like, well, I had to do student loans, so you need to suffer too. It's like they actually have a completely different experience with sex. And so I think it's complicated. I think that we need to cut them some slack. They're living in a better world, which I think is
Good thing.
a good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, you're saying they, because I still feel like I'm a young girl as well.
I'm just like, who they are. You're an old girl.
I think we're talking about Gen Z.
You're an old girl.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about through our lens. You didn't listen to the intro to the show? Millennial.
But no, so
Gen Z is
listen,
out
I found this is now an interesting piece of reporting that was put out by Gilead last year. They did a state of HIV stigma report, and that said, while knowledge about HIV is mostly stable across the United States, one generation has a significant gap in knowledge when compared to their peers, and we know that's Gen Z. It says that only 37% of Gen Z age people, ranging from the age of around 18 to 26, feel knowledgeable about HIV. And so I do think that the lack of HIV history and that knowledge and the epidemic does directly correlate with some of these younger gays talking out the side of their necks.
Yeah.
And I feel like just as a whole, we all need to be mindful about how we're using our words and who our audience is when we're talking.
Yeah.
Because imagine having, lived during the AIDS epidemic, right? And having someone that's talking to you not being thoughtful. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
So,
And I just
it
think
could be a teachable moment too, I think.
for more context, like I typically find the AIDS crisis to be one of the most not interesting, but fascinating periods in American history. So for context, AIDS was first medically recognized in 1981. President Reagan didn't publicly acknowledge it until 1985 when Rock Hudson died. So it took a very famous white man dying, a more masculine one, for everybody to go, wait, this is a real thing. And he didn't publicly address it until 1987.
Wow.
So 6 years of people from our community, young people. And like we think about the year before that, the 70s is the sex revolution. You come of age in the early 80s, and then all of a sudden you're 20, 22 years old and you're told sex is bad.
Yeah.
Don't go to the bathhouse. Don't engage in all the things you just fought for. And child, look at the pandemic we just went to. And they told you girls to stay in the house. And everybody was running around outside. Like, you can't compute. It is very
The girls
hard
were definitely outside.
for people to very abruptly change their lifestyle, especially young people. So I think that it's important as we have newer conversations around sexual health, as conversations around non-monogamy, conversations around just how we experience sex now, when we're having conversations with the elders who luckily are still here.
Yeah.
That we consider that history. History's fucking important. And we need to do more. I still consider myself younger. I don't know what's going on over there. But
I do. When you bring up one of the points you said is around Reagan didn't talk about it until this white man,
right,
had HIV, and then now all of a sudden. And so we did a mini series called "The Personal is Political," and I think when people start to see themselves in something that's being, an issue now they want to advocate, and that's the fucked up part about all of it. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna move into our last question. So what has been the most powerful thing you've learned in reclaiming pleasure in a world that often stigmatizes queer sex? You wanna start, Tony?
Pleasure.
Oh, you felt good?
I do feel good. I feel really good. So I'll start by saying there's a quote from Audre Lorde that I love. And I've said this before, and this is kind of like one of my things now that I kind of live by. She says that nothing I accept about myself can be used against me to diminish me. And for me, I accept that pleasure exists in many different ways. And I also accept that I deserve to have that pleasure in all those different ways on no uncertain terms. I feel like now I don't owe anyone any answers, and I should be able to get my life how I want to, as long as I'm not harming anyone else, as long as no one's harming me, as long as I'm not harming myself, unless I want to.
With consent.
With consent. With consent. Like I said in the video earlier, I've done that too.
Like a light choke.
A light press against the neck.
A light choke. Yeah. And then you have a safe word. But I think that all of those things together to put a button on it, for me, is like I'm reclaiming my time. I say, if you ain't fucking me, you ain't feeding me, you ain't financing me, then fuck off.
Jordan.
My relationship with pleasure and how I've reclaimed it. I think that HIV aside, I think that just generally speaking, it's been kind of difficult for me to sort of embrace my sexuality. I spent over half of my life just kind of deflecting any sort of attention towards my sexuality. I mean, me and Damon were met freshman year, living next door to each other.
Sophomore year.
Never mentioned
and I knew
at all for the entire Howard experience.
I knew.
Two sissies just living on campus, and we just
two sissies into the Howard University campus. School of Business.
Don't ask me, I won't ask you.
And
we actually came out to each other first year of New York after we graduated.
So who did it first?
Same time, kind of.
That's how
it was like, I'm gay.
Exactly. I think Damon was making his way from Boston, and you were coming up to New York to hang out for the weekend.
And then I think maybe you said you went to a gay club, and I said, I did too. And the rest is history.
Which, by the way, I met Tony at the first gay club that I went to in New York. And I was just like,
back in the day.
I went by myself, and I was just like, oh, I see somebody I recognize. And I was just like, hi, I think we know each other. I think we went to...
And I said, you know exactly who I am. And here we are.
You never know if somebody's going to be like,
And then I was driving down, and Jordan said, Damon's coming down, and then you said...
I said, do not come. I do not come. I didn't want to be friends with Damon, just based on preconceived notions, but then, Jordan didn't listen, and Damon came around with his colorful socks.
Oh, that was a phase. That was a terrible phase.
That was an interesting phase.
But we became such good Judies. I love y'all.
Yeah, Damon is a slow burn, and you allowed the candle to burn. Yes. But back to pleasure. I feel like I spent a lot of time deflecting away from my sexuality. So for me, even as I started to become sexually active, I feel like it was kind of hard to me to really feel a sense of intimacy and a sense of closeness. And yeah, and that had nothing to do with HIV. That was everything to do with, am I really about to jump in the gay pond and really like be in it, or can I fake it for a little bit longer? And faking it was really, really difficult, especially at Howard, because they will pull you out of that closet if they suspect that you're in it. And you know, I think that what's helped me at that time, you know, we were living in a different era.
Yeah.
Now it's much more, you know, colorful. But
Technical.
but yeah, I think that for me, what was helpful for me was just to understand that like everything that I can do is at my own pace. I think that sometimes, you know, there is a want to be like, now that you're out, now that you're proud, do it all, try it all. And I had to learn that's not really my personality. I'm a pretty cautious person. And so I think what's been really helpful for me to reclaim my pleasure is to really understand that like I'm not on anybody else's timeline but my own. And so I won't allow other people to make me feel like I'm not a good gay if I'm not doing certain things or interested in exploring certain things. And so I do things when I'm ready. And I feel like that's been the most transformational thing that's helped me in my journey.
Yeah. Sometimes you're gonna be a bad queer.
Love that.
Shout out to our podcasting sisters. For me, it's a couple things. One, learning to trust science. I think as Black people, you grow up with a bit of wariness to traditional medical apparatus. Like you think of all the things that have happened to us throughout history. And for me, I was just like, okay, we're gonna trust PrEP. We're going to listen to the things that are happening. And I think that was helpful too in spaces like this and people like this and hearing it from people like ourselves and maybe not just always a medical journal. Just because I'm not a science girly, but I can take information in. And then I think additionally, I say this a lot, and for me, I love to go outside and touch grass.
Yes.
Get off the internet with everyone's think pieces and their opinions that don't fucking matter, as Tony would say. And just get out in the real world and experience people for who they are. And I think that sexually, emotionally, spiritually, no matter what it is, that has been much more pleasing to me as a human being and as a person living in this world.
Yeah.
And that is what I continue to try and do.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at the board, let's check the board.
Let's check the board. I can't see.
I see some guilty, shame. Some of the stuff is concerning that I hope some folks.
Big Mac.
Big Mac. Ooh.
What does that mean?
Well, we'll talk about it after the show.
Oh, okay. Well, freedom, passion, and freeing seems to be the biggest, and joy.
Yeah.
We love joy. We love freedom. That's my favorite word. And that is all the time we have this week. This episode was produced in partnership with Harlem Stage and powered by Gilead Sciences. If you enjoyed this episode, let's keep the conversation going. Let us know your thoughts and questions at surfacelevelpodcast.com. And remember, stay curious. All right.